When is an Ivy League college really test optional versus nominally test optional? That is the subject of today's very short video. The fact of the matter is that a college can be officially test optional, but for you, that college is really not test optional. What do I mean by this? Well, the students who are actually capable of applying test optionally and not worrying that their lack of scores is going to hurt their chances of admission to that very selective college or university, i.e. an Ivy League school. Let's focus on those today. Are the students who, in a prior universe, i.e. before COVID, when all these schools were not test optional, these were already students who could apply to the same Ivy League colleges like Dartmouth and Penn and Brown with lower than typical SAT or ACT scores and still have a shot of admission to that college or university. So who are these types of students? Well, number one, I would say legacy students benefit from test optional admissions policies at Ivy League schools because legacy students are children of alumni, children or grandchildren of alumni, many times children or grandchildren of donating alumni. And so these students already had a huge advantage from being a legacy applicant. As a result, in a world pre-COVID, pre-test optional admissions at these Ivy League schools, such a student would be able to apply to a Dartmouth, a Yale, a Princeton with lower than typical SAT or ACT scores and still have a considerable shot of getting in, even if they had lower than average SAT or ACT scores. So for that type of student, a legacy whose family has donated money, that is definitely a situation where that student can apply test optionally with some degree of confidence that they actually are applying to a test optional school. Another group of students who can apply test optionally are students who are athletes, recruitable athletes in particular to an Ivy League D1 institution, as the Ivy League schools are. If they're a recruitable athlete, a student already had a chance of being a real considerable attraction to that Ivy League school in a pre-COVID world with, let's say, lower than average SAT scores. Doesn't mean they're bottom of the basement or bottom of the barrel SAT or ACT scores, but lower than the non-athletic recruit community, absolutely, is definitely a sure bet. So we've covered two groups: legacy students whose families have donated, but also athletic recruits. Number three group that can apply with confidence test optionally to an Ivy League college or university would be a student from an underrepresented minority. Now, this, depending on the year, can change. You can look up what these schools sort of refer to currently as underrepresented minorities, but basically what they're trying to get at these schools is more of a certain type of student, and they deem certain type of students more attractive based off of their demographics. This could be anything from geographic underrepresentation to racial underrepresentation to ethnic or international underrepresentation, but whatever the case may be, again, in a pre-COVID world when test scores were required at the Ivy League institutions, those students already would have been able to apply with lower than average SAT or ACT test scores and still have a real shot of getting into that Ivy League college or university. So for those three groups, legacy students whose family donate money, athletic recruits, and students from underrepresented minorities as viewed from the perspective of the college admissions team, those groups of students definitely can and maybe should, I wouldn't say absolutely should, but maybe should apply without submitting test scores to Ivy League schools and can still go to sleep at night knowing that they have a real potential shot of getting in because they would have had a real potential shot of getting into that Ivy League college or university even if they had applied with lower than average SAT or ACT test scores in a pre-test optional environment. For everyone else, and this is the kicker, for everyone else, I highly recommend that you submit your test scores to the Ivy League schools and that you submit test scores that are in the middle 50% or higher of what that college accepted pre-COVID. That's just how it is. So basically, the bottom line is don't view Ivy League colleges as test optional. For the vast majority of first year entry students, first year applicant students applying from their senior year of high school around the world, you want to be able to have the feather in your cap of strong SAT or ACT test scores when you apply to an Ivy League college or university, and therefore you should view an Ivy League college or university, regardless of their official policy, as a test required institution and one at which you want to submit test scores that are in the high 1400s or higher, at which point you are in the thick of it in terms of what these colleges would normally accept in a pre-COVID world. Same thing with the ACT test scores, 32, 33 or higher minimum, so that you can be the most competitive applicant possible. Only a very small percentage of applicants would check the box of being a legacy whose family donates, an athletic recruit, or a student representing what the college deems to be an underrepresented minority. So keep that in mind as you strategically navigate the college admissions process to the most selective colleges and universities in the United States, but particularly those in the Ivy League.